Hello and welcome to the radiotimes.com Doctor Who podcast. My name's Huw Fullerton.
My name's Morgan Jeffrey.
And this week we're talking about the terrorising tin pots of terror. I almost was going to say the tin pots of terror, and I was like, no, I'll say the terrifying tin pots to make them even scarier. But I realised
you tripped yourself up.
I tripped myself up and also lost the ability to use terror. We're talking about the Daleks, essentially.
Yeah.
Because they're the Doctor's greatest foe, and there's going to be a lot of Dalek stuff coming up soon. We're specifically talking about some new announcements that were made recently about the Daleks series. I was going to say TV series, but it's an online series, the Daleks web series that's coming to the BBC Doctor Who YouTube channel. So we've talked about this on the podcast before when it was first announced, and some images were there, but they've now released some more footage and some more details about the story. I guess first to kick off, we should say that the big sort of thing that came out of New York Comic Con for Daleks was that the big enemies, I suppose you could say, are going to be the Mechanoids. Now, Morgan, who are the Mechanoids, and how might they fit into this?
The Mechanoids, Huw. They are a Doctor Who foe that originally appeared in the 1960s, and they've been pretty popular in spin-off fiction, in books and audio plays and comic strips. But they made their one and only TV appearance so far, but barring a surprise comeback in Revolution of the Daleks. They made their one and only TV appearance in 1965 in the classic TV story The Chase, where the first Doctor and his companions arrive on the planet Mechanus, where the Mechanoids battle the Daleks. Now, there is some disagreement about how you spell mechanoid, whether it's mechanoid or mechanoid with an O or an A. It's been spelt several different ways over the years. And confusing the matter further is that the Mechanoids were originally meant to be called the Mechons or the Mekons, but they had to change that name because it's too similar to the name of Dan Dare's arch enemy, the Mekon. But I guess they just didn't entirely rewrite all the references in the script, because at one point in The Chase, the Daleks do refer to the Mechanoids as Mechons, thus further muddying the waters. But they have a great design, the Mechanoids. They sort of look like evil mechanical Christmas tree baubles. I think that's the best way of describing them. But it's a rather impractical design in actuality when you're filming on a set because of their size. But that makes them a perfect monster for comic strips and now for animation. And they've been remodeled, we're told, for the 21st century for Daleks, this new animated web series. And although they're traditionally portrayed as a foe of the Daleks, they're one of their greatest nemeses, they're going to be seen here actually forming an uneasy alliance with the Daleks to go up against an even greater threat.
I mean, funny you should say the thing about the Christmas tree baubles, because I thought they looked rather like perfume bottles. You know, the sort of round ones you get with the little with the little head top. Yeah, I think so. Definitely, if they want to cash in this Christmas, get some Mechanoid or Mechanoid merch out there. Some merchanoids. Yeah, that kind of works. Get that going, and people will love it. I was also going to say, one of the things that people say about the Mechanoids, isn't it, that they're one of the few races in the universe that kind of can take on the Daleks, kind of, well, if not toe to toe, then sort of bumper to bumper. And I mean, there's some origin for that, isn't it? They sort of, I think that's from The Chase, isn't it?
Yeah, they're very much, you see them take on the Daleks in the final episodes of The Chase. And they go bumper to bumper, and they give the Daleks a pretty good thrashing. But it's also interesting that when they're first introduced in The Chase, they were intended to be a monster to rival the Daleks in the affections of fans. Originally, it was like, these guys, the Mechanoids, they could be the new Daleks. As it turned out, it was their one and only appearance. Didn't really go that way because, as I explained, kind of the clunkiness of the design meant they weren't really sort of very practical. But they were employed, sort of to great success in the TV 21 comic strips, the sort of Dalek solo strip that ran in TV 21 magazine in the 1960s, that sort of chronicled the Daleks' war with the Mechanoids, and very much more so, I would say, even than their appearance in The Chase, established them as a kind of formidable and recurring foe for the Daleks.
I mean, were they kind of the Poochie of Doctor Who? They're the sort of hip new thing that comes in, and then it's basically like the Mechanoids died on the way back to their home planet, which we visited.
No, On television, so far at least, yeah, pretty much. But they have found great success in other media, and now in animation. And it's interesting because when I think even before this Mechanoid announcement came out, people were talking about Daleks and how it sounded from the premise, but also when we saw first look images and we had a first look at the teaser trailer, and people were saying, yeah, of course, it takes its inspiration from Doctor Who on television, but it really brings to mind those old Dalek comic strips from TV21 magazine. And now I think that's now clearly the inspiration, given that they've thrown the old Dalek Mechanoid rivalry in the show as well, which is very much something that does, if not originate, then it was very much expanded on in those strips.
Definitely. I mean, when I spoke to Nick Briggs about Daleks, I think he was giving a bit of a hint in that he said it was very much inspired by the kind of TV21 strips. Although there are definitely as well, in the footage we have seen, it kind of ties together different eras of Doctor Who, because you see a glimpse of Skaro, which is very much how it looks in The Magician's Apprentice, which is familiar, double episode from 2015, I think. And obviously, that's a recent depiction of Skaro, a pretty full one where you see all these sort of buildings. So there's no reason they wouldn't do that. But it's kind of nice to see it all kind of tied together. I do also think your point about the Mechanoids being a good monster for animation is an interesting one, because, yeah, obviously it's kind of, we've talked before on this podcast, regular viewers will know about the potential of animation for Doctor Who, and, whether that would have maybe, helped during things like coronavirus, things like that. And with a show like this, we're maybe seeing other sides of, like, even ignoring problems of social distancing and things like that. There have always been issues with, certain monsters. Famously K9 was like impossible to deal with, which is why K9 vanishes, and also why he wasn't in the Sarah Jane Adventures very much. And also, we see these things with the Mechanoids where they were just a bit too unwieldy. And this is a kind of a fun way of, re-entering them into kind of, obviously they've been in Doctor Who canon, but it feels like Daleks, it's going to be on YouTube. It feels like this is going to be a pretty mainstream entry for them, if not, the proper main series. This is going to be one of the most public-facing things they've had, isn't it?
Yeah, no, definitely. And yeah, no, it's a really good point about sort of the limits that animation can help overcome, and it applies to the Daleks as well. Yeah, it's the old cliche about Daleks not being able to go upstairs, and of course they can. And actually, on TV in live action on Doctor Who, we have seen some pretty spectacular Dalek sequences. In recent years, I always particularly think of like Day of the Doctor, where you saw some absolutely sort of phenomenal visual sequences, action sequences with the Daleks. Having said that, and not to suggest that animation is cheap necessarily, but you can absolutely do things with the Daleks and now the Mechanoids in animation that you couldn't do in live action. You can have these kind of huge sweeping space scenes with thousands of Daleks in a way that's not impossible to do in live action with CG and visual effects, but it's definitely harder to do. So I think that's hopefully going to give Daleks a sense of real scope, even if it is being delivered to us in bite-sized 10-minute episodes.
It's interesting as well, is that I've seen some suggestions that part of the reason the Mechanoids have been picked as like such a key player in this story is that, there's difficulties in rendering realistic looking people in animation, and there's difficulties in organic creatures in general, particularly any that we'd be familiar with, kind of quote unquote live action. So a lot of the creatures we've seen for Daleks have seemed to be fairly robotic. There's we know Joe Soap's playing a robot character, and we see a few other characters who are certainly very vaguely cyborgy or androidy in the footage. And I do think that's quite interesting, because obviously you kind of you don't want to lose the immersion, do you? And that's sometimes the risk with animation, is that you can kind of be reminded that you're watching an animation. So I think it's quite a canny move to kind of, because there are so many Doctor Who monsters that are this sort of, I don't want to say faceless, but they have that kind of slightly more stylized look in design. I think it's kind of nice to transfer those ones in particular into this format.
Yeah, it's what I would always call, the Toy Story problem, which is that Toy Story had these fantastic visuals, and when it's scenes focused on the toys, it you go, okay, I totally buy into this. I buy into this world. Whereas the humans in Toy Story, I never really bought into, because they look like toys. You know what I mean? They kind of have the same uncanny plastic sheen as the toys do, which works for the toys but doesn't work for the humans. So yeah, I think I agree. It's harder to portray kind of convincing human characters in animation, particularly if you have any kind of limits around the animation. So it makes sense for there to be more of a focus on kind of robotic and android characters, Daleks and Mechanoids. I mean, we know that Anjali Mahindra, now her role has been confirmed as Queen of the Mechanoids. So we know that she's playing a kind of an android role, which of course follows on from her role as Queen Skithra in Doctor Who. And she played, of course, Rani in the Sarah Jane Adventures, and Rani actually means queen. So
I didn't know that. Is that, do you reckon that's a little Easter egg?
I don't know, but there's something very regal clearly about Anjali Mahindra. She always plays a queen one way or another.
Yeah, I mean, she's Doctor Who royalty already, if we didn't already know. That's great. That's a really good little Doctor Who fact. We should get a sound effect for Doctor Who facts on the podcast. Be like, ding, but we won't, because we can't afford it. Yeah, so that's really interesting. I didn't know that at all. I was going to say, talking of the animation, one of the other main things people have chatted about, as you would with any new animation thing, is the style and quality of this show. I mean, definitely I think wouldn't be remiss in saying there's been a little bit of, if not backlash, then some people have criticized slightly the style of this show. Someone's on YouTube, someone said it looks a bit like Bamzuki. I don't know if you remember Bamzuki, which was a CBBC show, which was involved computer animation. But someone else says, I think this looks great, really stylized. And someone else says, as long as the storytelling's up to scratch, I don't really care how it looks. I mean, what do you think? How do you think the story's translating to screen based on the short clips we've seen so far?
Yeah, so we've seen some clips from the first episode. We've seen a teaser trailer and a slightly longer trailer. I actually thought it looked pretty good. I agree. It's definitely like a stylized look that they're going for. But I think they're probably aware, as we've discussed, about the the limits of the animation. I think focusing on those mechanical characters like Daleks and Mechanoids, where they have a very distinct, definitive look. I think that's really smart. I think it's really interesting how when I was trying to think of a way to describe the kind of visual look, the best thing I could come up with is dark but colourful, which doesn't really sounds like it's kind of like an oxymoron, but it is. It's quite a stark and dark look that the show has, but also with these kind of glimpses of really bright sort of technicolor as well. And so, which again, I think it's kind of that color palette is a throwback to the TV21 strips. So I actually think it looks great personally, and also I think Doctor Who animation of the past has been a bit of a mixed bag. You've had a variety of different approaches from recently we've seen things like the reconstructions of the missing episodes, and then back in the day you had stuff like, as we've talked about before, you had stuff like the Infinite Quest and Dreamland, and I think those projects definitely have their strengths and their weaknesses. I think for the most part the animation wasn't necessarily their most impressive element. So I agree with that user saying that I think story is king. I have quite sort of fond memories of both those stories, even if the animation wasn't necessarily their chief selling point. I think it's more important that the story works. But actually, I don't think that the visuals on Daleks are anything to be ashamed of. I actually think I really like the stylized look.
Definitely, yeah. I know what you mean. I've seen some people saying it's definitely an homage to the TV21 thing, and I think I like that it looks a little different. Like, one of the things that's nice about it versus the kind of reconstructions you mentioned and things like the Infinite Quest or Dreamland is that those are very much kind of trying to ape the style of the show and kind of do a version of that in animation, whereas this is definitely its own thing. Like, I think part of the reason that people are reacting so strongly is because it looks quite unusual. It looks quite different. Like, even the angles that we're seeing, it's kind of a bit skewed in an interesting way. And I mean, I guess we're really going to have to see the whole thing, because we're only seeing the really big flashy moments at the moment. We'll have to see how the animation style marries to I mean, I guess there's not going to be too many quiet moments because they're all quite short episodes, but how it kind of works as a whole and how much it kind of plays over time.
Yeah, definitely. I mean, we haven't seen any huge dialogue scenes in the clips, possibly because, I don't know, maybe is that because they don't play as well, or is it just because there aren't any huge dialogue scenes when it's such rapid storytelling with, as we said, the bite-sized episodes. But I think how exactly the story plays out is going to be a really interesting part of Daleks, because, as you said, I think it's 5 10-minute episodes that are going to be on the Doctor Who YouTube channel, which does again feel like something of a throwback to something like the Infinite Quest from 2007, which was 13 very short episodes, all about like sort of 3 to 4 minutes. But then it was also broadcast as a compilation to make up one 45-minute episode. So it seems to me as if, like, Daleks could potentially be released as an omnibus that would be, kind of 50-minute one shot. And so, I mean, that's just speculation on my part, but it seems like something that could happen, going off past form. And then, so the story kind of has to work in that bite-sized format, but it also has to work as sort of one story played across 50 minutes, which I think is a challenge. So it'll be interesting to see how they tackle that as well.
Definitely. But yeah, I mean, what do you think, listeners? Are you excited to see how Daleks turns out? Do you have your concerns about the animation style, or are you just excited to see the Mechanoids back? Please let us know in comments or at Radio Times on Twitter, or wherever you want. There's loads of places to reach us. We also have loads of details about Daleks on radiotimes.com. We have a page about how you can watch it, and news stories about the new releases, and interview time with Nick Briggs coming up soon, where we kind of get a little bit more involved with the whole process. And we'll be back probably talking about Daleks very soon, because it comes out on November 12th. We're going to try our best to review it, even if we just watch it on YouTube with the rest of you. And yeah, hopefully it will live up to our sky-high expectations. No pressure there. Apart from that, we should probably say our goodbyes. We'll be back next week with another Doctor Who podcast from radiotimes.com. We'll be going a bit spooky in the lead up to Halloween. That's all the tease I'll give you. We're going a bit spooky, so you can enjoy that. And yeah, until then, I've been Huw Fullerton.
I've been Morgan Jeffrey.
And this has been us saying goodbye. Goodbye.